everyone, how are you all doing? Welcome back to my channel and to my solo podcast, Shh, episode 4. It's me, Rinima Borah, and today I'm going to take you back in time, way back to when it all started. As you know, I've spoken about many personal topics before, but I realized that I haven't really shared my story from the beginning. And this is going to be the start of a series where I share how I went from being a little girl born in a tiny village in Assam to the life I have today. Well, let me start by telling you about where I come from, because it's not a place you would imagine when you look at me now. But I was born on August 29th, 1987. It was a Saturday in a small village called Sarubhagia in Assam. It's so small, my dear friends, that most of you wouldn't even know that it exists. The nearest town to us was called Jakalabandha, but that was just a small stop on the way to somewhere else. We were part of the Nagaon district in the northeastern part of India. And this is where my story begins. I was born into a family of 4. My dad, my mom, my older sister, and me. My dad, when I was born, was already a voluntarily retired army man who later on became a businessman. And my mom, who worked for the government in the irrigation department. My parents both came from very humble beginnings. Both of them were children of farmers. And they worked incredibly hard to provide us with whatever best they could. We weren't rich, not at all. In fact, we were poor. But that didn't mean there wasn't love. You know, my dad was my hero, I was his favorite, and he was mine. Our home where I was born was nothing like it is today. Today, if you see my house, it's a 2-story duplex building, all concrete. But back then, it was a small, humble home. The walls were made of bamboo, the ceiling was made of hay, and the floor was made of mud and clay. My parents worked hard to save money and buy the land, and they made that home with their own hands. And even though it wasn't fancy, it was proudly ours, and we were so happy inside it. And now I realize that one thing that shaped me growing up in Assam was the fact that I belonged to a matriarchal society, you know? It's something that's so rare in the rest of my country, India, where it's mostly a patriarchal setup. But in Assam or the rest of northeast of India, women were the backbone of everything. Every woman in my family worked, and they worked hard. My mom balanced a full-time government job and took care of the house, kids. My dad's younger sister, Deepa Pehi, like I call her, had a boutique and a salon. My mom's older sister, Junu Jathai, was a businesswoman who owned the biggest bookstore in town, still does. Another aunt was a headmistress, Ranu auntie. And others were teachers, government workers, athletes, you name it. They were all in my family. Every woman around me was strong, right? They were independent, they were hardworking, and they showed me what it kind of meant to be resilient from that young age. I didn't know how rare this was until much later in life, of course, but growing up in that environment, it felt so natural. My parents were determined to make sure that both my sister and I had the best education they could provide, even though we didn't have much. And I was the lucky one. Because despite all the hardships, education was their top priority for me as well as for my sister, of course. They poured everything they had into making sure we could focus on our studies. My dad would always tell me and my sister how he had to leave school after his 10th grade to work and support his family. And he never wanted that for us, you know. And my mom, despite growing up in a farming household where her own mother didn't believe in education, pushed through and became a government employee because my grandfather supported her education. And she ensured she completed her bachelor's. And this belief in education was passed on to us, and it became my driving force. But as much love as I had at home, the outside world wasn't really kind, right? I started attending an English medium school called the Sacred Heart School in this town called Tejpur, about an hour from our village, Sarubhagia, when I was around 4.5 years old. My parents were convinced by our neighbors. There were these 2 special girls who moved in near us from a bigger city. And they were the one who persisted and convinced my parents that English would open doors for me. So off I went to this new world where I quickly realized I wasn't like the other kids. I was surrounded by classmates from wealthier families, and while I loved learning, especially English, it was my favorite subject, it didn't take long for me to feel the weight of my background. 2 incidents in particular still stick with me today. The first one was on my birthday. I was in the 5th grade and my mom had brought fabric from Jakalabandha. It was probably 40 to 50 rupees per meter. My aunt, Deepa auntie, who lived with us and she also had a boutique, she stitched the dress for me. It was a simple dress, but I felt so special in it. I still remember. It had this cute German vibe to it, you know, with balloon sleeves, and I wore it with like pretty socks and with pride. But at school, there was this Marwari guy called Amit, who came from a definitely much richer background and family than mine. He touched the fabric of my dress and he goes, "Dude, even my maid doesn't wear something this cheap." And those words stung. At that moment, I realized I was poor, and worse, that people could see it, you know. The second incident also was on the same birthday. Basically, my 5th grade birthday sucked. Despite my parents telling me not to invite anyone to the birthday party because there wasn't one and they couldn't afford a party, I invited all my friends anyway. That was me. And my parents, being the loving people that they were, pulled together whatever they could last minute. You know, they made puri, they made sabji, they baked a homemade cake, they put balloons. They did everything in their power to make it special for me. But when I went back to school the next day, there was this neighbor friend of mine, Pooja, who had come to the party. And she went back and told everyone in the school that I wore the same dress I wore to school. I didn't have an outfit change like they all did on their birthdays. She mocked how there was no buffet, no chicken, and said it was the poorest birthday party she had ever been to. And no, I don't remember crying, but I do remember feeling a very deep sense of hurt. Not anger, not sadness, but something else, you know, a fire inside me. It made me think that bloody hell, just wait. And one day I'm gonna show you all. You know what I mean? Because I'm in 5th grade, I'm young, you see. But those 2 moments, being mocked for my dress and my birthday party, were so pivotal for me, you know. They weren't just about embarrassment, they were my wake-up calls. They made me realize that yes, I was poor, but it also sparked something inside me, you know, a determination. And by the time I was around 9 or 10 years old, I understood that I came from a poor family and that there were kids who had more than I did. But instead of letting it break me, it fueled me. I became protective of my family. I didn't want my parents or my sister to ever feel ashamed of where we came from. And I immediately wanted to shield them from the world that tried to make us feel less of us, you know, and I wanted to prove to myself that I could rise above it. I look back at all those years today with pride, you know, not pain. They made me who I am today, you guys. And every time someone underestimated me because of where I came from, it added to my drive. And that's what I want to leave you with today. Where you were born doesn't determine where you end up. You set your own boundaries. The world doesn't get to tell you what you can or cannot achieve. You do, alone. So that's my story from 0 to 10. And in the next episode, we will dive into the next chapter of my life from 10 to 20 years, where things only got more complicated. But for now, remember this. No matter where you come from, no matter how small your village or how humble your beginnings, you have the power to change your story, and that's what I did. Thank you so very much for listening to me. If you liked this episode, do give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel and drop your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear your stories too. Catch you in the next episode of Shh. Until then, don't ever shh yourself, okay? I love you deeply, always.